I will just like to say thank you for your patience with me, canceled flights and other things, but I'm really happy to be here. Sorry that I missed the great conversations yesterday, but eager to really engage today. So the vision for micro-credentials in Tennessee, as most of you know, we've spent the last 3 years just really trying to learn as much as we possibly can about the way teachers perceive micro-credentials, as well as the conditions that exist in both schools and districts that would, as you heard Barnett say earlier, that would most help micro-credentials thrive in those types of environments. At this point, we have learned lots and lots, and we've learned from successes, and we have also learned from failures. And so we're really at a point of the 3-year official pilot has ended. It ended in May and the beginning of June this year, and we are now transitioning the knowledge that we've learned to districts. So we're engaged currently in a kind of a turnover of responsibility. The state of Tennessee will no longer fund micro-credentials, but will impart the learning that we have gained to districts and really support them, hopefully, in being able to implement at the district level. So it's a really interesting time because the state has been so involved for 3 years, but we hope that all that we've learned and knowledge that we've gained over the last 3 years, that districts will really take that up and be able to run with the information they now have.
Thank you. I want to just really quickly say how much I appreciate KVEC and having the opportunity to be here with all the people and learn from and with everybody around this idea of micro-credentials. So at KEDC, we've spent this year in a pilot with Bloomboard around micro-credentials. So when I think about what our vision is using the information that we've gathered from this pilot experience to think about how micro-credentials can be a vehicle for the schools and districts we serve in their professional learning, and thinking about how we're going to support that work. And we are still in the process of sort of disseminating all the information we have and talking to the participants in the micro-credentials and looking at evidence to decide what that's going to look like exactly, but it's been a lot of growing and learning. We know that because of the geography of the districts and schools that we serve, micro-credentialing and that technology can be a great way for us to reach out without being physically in that space. And we know that that on-demand piece is really important to the schools and districts we serve. So we're starting to really think about what can this look like long-term, and a lot of the conversations that have happened yesterday and today are helping refine our thinking around that.
So it feels weird to talk about our vision when our vision is sitting to the right of me, but our vision, I think, for micro-credentials is fitting within a broader system of competency-based professional learning. And to amen what Barnett said this morning, I think KVEC's vision is really about teachers and principals leading their own professional learning, having a time and a space to engage in formal collaborations, networks, and time to learn from each other, really helping to build the capacity of principals and teachers, because we can't forget principals in this whole professional learning conversation, because I think they're the ones that have been left out for so long. Their professional learning has really been about compliance and making sure their school's name stays out of the newspaper, rather than thinking about innovation and how they can grow as a leader. I think we've invested so much in teachers, and principals need that same investment. But those teachers and principals need to be at the table. So those of you today who brought your teachers to this summit, amen to you, because those teachers need a voice. It's not right, it's not fair for us to sit in a room and make policy and design professional learning to do to them. They need a voice because they know what their students' needs are. They know their school climate, their school culture. They know the communities that they relate to. They've got to be the ones that help us to determine what that professional learning looks like, what those micro-credentials are, what the evidence looks like. They are the ones that have to help guide that work. So at KVEC, we really are trying to move toward a complete system of competency-based professional learning. Every year, we award more than 100 innovation grants to teachers, which really are 100 plus examples, different examples of personalized professional learning. Those teachers identify a problem of practice that they have in their classroom, right here, right now. This is a problem that I have. And they design an action research plan to solve that problem. And they go engage in their own formal and informal professional learning to solve that problem of practice. And it's neither better nor worse than a micro-credential. It's just different. It's a different type of professional learning, and we have got to start recognizing that type of professional learning, because teachers and principals are professionals, and they don't need to be micromanaged from the top down. We've got to start lifting them up and including them in the conversations, and I think that's KVEC's vision through innovation grants and professional action networks and activating catalytic transformation, the different things that we have talked about, the different examples that you've seen in the hallway. I think that truly is our vision.
And Jennifer leads into the next question. You may want to hang on to the microphone. You've already begun to answer it, so it may not take long. But if you all could talk a little bit about how micro-credentials fit into a competency-based professional learning system, and how you see that connection, I think we would all be interested in hearing more about that from your point of view. So how do micro-credentials fit into a competency-based professional learning system that could be a much bigger, I think Barnett used the word ecosystem earlier.
Yeah. Well, just to reiterate that I think micro-credentials are one example of competency-based professional learning. I think we talk a lot in our co-op, our staff do, about different work streams by which people learn and grow. And so networking is a form of competency-based professional learning, mentoring, coaching. There are other forms of clinical professional learning, including those action research models that we've talked about. But I think it all goes back to having building collective efficacy of an entire school or of an entire district or an entire region, and really helping to build that capacity of folks to do the job within the context of where they are, of their school, of their classrooms, of their communities. And I just really think that's what we are trying to do in our region. I think we've really come far in that work. And learning from each other, to me, also is a form of competency-based professional learning. Having, Letitia has been a longtime friend, and she's at a neighboring co-op, and every time we're together, we pick each other's brains about what's going on and what are you doing and how are you doing it. And that's what our teachers do too, and we have to value that kind of professional learning rather than giving a seat time as the currency for learning. We've got to move to a different model that values those competencies, and I think we have examples of that where we are at our co-op.
I would echo all that, and I would say for us, because we serve 65 plus districts and we're spread across a pretty large area, and inside of those 65 plus districts, we have lots of smaller alliances, and we have role group specific cadres. So, for example, we have counselor cadres that meet in 2 different locations. And I think that when I think about micro-credentials and the potential they have to serve those groups, as Jennifer said, it's one way that those groups can grow professionally. They're already growing professionally, competency-based growth, around how they work together in cadres. They address problems that they have, because oftentimes they may be the only counselor in a high school, because of the way our districts look. We may only have one high school. So they have an opportunity to meet together with other high school counselors and talk about problems of practice and work through ways to address that, and also collaborate on those issues. Our hope is that micro-credentials will be one more tool that our co-op can help districts use to grow professionally, one more way they can come together collaboratively to learn and grow. And I keep thinking about how those micro-credentials can offer the singletons, the people who are in those individual roles that don't have a lot of opportunities to work with other people, a chance to collaborate as well, and and for teachers that we know who are superstars to really be recognized for what they know how to do well in a way that isn't always an option in the current system that we know for professional development.
And again, I echo everything that both Jennifer and Letitia just said, but would just add that as they mentioned with the mentoring and coaching being competency-based tools and as part of systems that we have already, I think the power of the micro-credential within a system like that really lies with the ability for the micro-credential to ground these conversations in tangible evidence. So if I'm in a mentoring relationship or I'm part of a collaborative and I introduce the micro-credential into that system, I'm now able to speak very concretely about what's happening and what's happening with my students and in the areas that I need continued support in. It's just, I think the tangible nature of what the micro-credential brings through that, through the evidence part is really the power that will move the competency-based professional learning system forward.
Thank you. And just hang on to the mic and we'll just go back and forth as we go. One of the observations I would make is that the three of you have roles that are not for the faint of heart. Being able to support schools and districts on a pathway to improvement is not always an easy task. And I'll leave it at that, but sometimes it can be a bit challenging to be able to help people in ways that are beneficial to them. And I wonder if you could talk a little bit about, from your role, in your role, how are you supporting districts, schools, and educators to develop that competency-based system of professional learning that includes micro-credentials?
The main approach that we have taken is really, we've really focused on building district capacity. And so we have asked districts to identify specifically a pilot coordinator around micro-credentials and really worked with them monthly. In monthly meetings, we've come together really trying to build a network. So we realized how important it is for those district leads to have support from other districts and other district leaders around this topic, around competency-based professional learning, around micro-credentials, et cetera. It's one of the, something that I hear quite often is it's lonely out there, especially in this, with this work being so new around competency-based learning, that the need for a network, the need for support, and the need to be able to engage with other folks that speak the language, that understand the challenges is really critical. So one thing that I've made my mission from the department is really not so much getting the districts to rely on the state, but empowering the districts to rely on each other and building networks and building connections so that they can reach out to each other. So that's, I would say that would be our key approach to helping to support districts in that way.
I would say the thing I think that we have done this year, because it has been our pilot year, is to really immerse ourselves in the work. So my partner in crime this year in this pilot has been Charles Rutledge, who isn't with us today. But the two of us, when we began, started, we have a partnership with Bloomboard. I think that's really important to say, and we found that to be one of the things that has helped us really gain a lot of understanding. But it was important for us to get in the weeds, and I know Jennifer did this, and I learned from her definitely, of actually writing the micro-credentials, creating the rubrics, doing the assessment, having the interaction with the participants, because we didn't want to say, oh, yes, here's a packaged micro-credential, go and implement it. that was not going to be a way for us to really be able to help the people who were participating. And we spent this year doing a 4-program micro-credential pilot. And in those 4 programs, we wanted to really talk about what we called the bread and butter micro-credentials. So we had an assessment literacy program, we had a classroom management program, and then we wanted to really stretch our thinking into what are things that people could be using that they don't often have an opportunity to pursue. And we partnered with ASCD and did a micro-credential program around globally competent teaching and learning. And I say that with really specificity there because it wasn't a global competence micro-credential, but it was a globally competent teaching and learning, and what that looked like for teachers who wanted to really pursue an opportunity to bring that global awareness into their teaching and learning practices. So in that work, because we were creating that from scratch, it was word by word, and that wordsmithing and going back and saying, this isn't really what we wanted this to do or be, this isn't going to get to the evidence that we believe really shows that teachers have this competency. I feel like we learned so much, and we have been able to hopefully put that into play in how we are working, not only in the micro-credentials, but in all the professional learning that we're doing out of the co-op, and what it really means to have evidence that shows that teachers have that competency, and how to kind of create opportunities for growth like that with all the groups that we work with. And I think that that will also help inform what we do in the future as we think about what districts want. So now that we've done the pilot, we want to be able to go to districts and say, we have an understanding around how to create the micro-credential experience for you, and now we want to know what it is that we can do to help move your school or your district forward. How can we partner with you to make sure that you're getting a competency-based micro-credential experience that can really help benefit you specifically?
So like Letitia said, at our co-op, we do have a lot of different examples of networks and cadres that are working to help build competency and build capacity within the folks that we serve. But one example of that kind of support that I'd like to lift out, and I could talk all day about it, but you don't want to hear me talk all day about it. We have a program that we work with, a network that we call Activating Catalytic Transformation. And this year we have 19 schools that will actually next week will come together for 2 days of intensive work where they learn how to engage in shared leadership, data analysis, where the entire staff is engaged in looking at all of their sources of data. So they're not just looking at state accountability and assessment data. They're not just looking at interim benchmark data. They're looking at all data. They're looking at demographic data, perception data, learning data. Everything that they can come up with about their students that they serve, their communities where they reside, their school. They bring all that data together, and they even look at intersections of data. So let's look at our students who are living with their grandparents, and what interventions are those students receiving, and what extracurricular activities are those kids engaged in? What are their classroom grades, and how do those classroom grades compare to their interim benchmark assessment grades? We really try to help them dig down deep into their data to formally kind of get a picture of where their school is. And then from there, as a school, as a complete shared leadership team, frame a problem of practice that they're going to work together on throughout the year. Now, when a school engages in that kind of data analysis, they could come up with 1 million problems of practice, but they're really looking for that one that they can come together as a school that's going to be a high leverage problem of practice that when it is solved, it's really going to advance outcomes for everyone. And when they do that, they develop a logic model, a theory of action around, if this is what we want for our students, then this is what our teachers need to do. And teachers are engaged in that plan. They're the ones saying, in order to get my students here, this is what I have to do, and this is what I have to learn. And so are there micro-credentials that exist that will help move me that way? Or are there networks I need to be a part of? Or are there schools in our region or even outside of our region I need to go visit that are going to help me get there? They're really digging deep to find out what is my individual theory of action that's going to help my students. And then principals are saying, what is it I can do that will help my teachers do what they say they're going to do? What's my professional learning? What is it I need to participate in, or where do I need to go, or what do I need to do? And then that central office piece, which is really critical, because I've been one of those central office people, and a lot of times the instructional supervisors and the folks that are handling the paperwork and the compliance issues put a lot of burden on principals that keep them from engaging in that type of roll up their sleeves kind of work with their teachers. So what are the things that I can do to support a principal in this work? And as a community member, they have a role in the theory of action. What can I do? But micro-credentials then are embedded in that framework, that logic model that is moving that school forward. And then as a cooperative, we all know who those ACT schools are and what they're trying to do, and how can we, with all of our different support structures, really wrap a system of supports around those schools and help move them. Because we know when they develop solutions to those challenges, we're going to be able to share those across our region so that everybody can learn from them and everybody can benefit from the tools that they develop and the structures that they uncover and the protocols that they engage in. We have McGoffin County High School is here, and Louisa East is here, and Allen Elementary is here, and they've all engaged in that kind of work, but they're sharing their solutions across the region or with anybody that wants to learn from them. And I think, that is a way that we as a co-op can support them when we know what they're trying to do.
So we're going to go rapid fire response to questions for about 5 minutes so that we can leave about 10 minutes for you all to ask questions. And the first one that I'm going to ask is, what's on the near horizon for you? Not way out in the future, but what are you planning this year to help advance this work?
Well, I've already kind of said that we are really analyzing our pilot experience, and we are reaching out to our districts to ask them, to talk about what we've learned based on what we know, what would be of service to you. And we're also looking at ways to embed micro-credentialing into the cadres that we already have in place. Like Jennifer said, the co-ops in Kentucky typically have cadres of role groups, and so how can micro-credentials help serve the professional learning of those role groups? And I think we are also really interested in, after we disseminate this day's learning and yesterday's learning, really figuring out how that helps fine-tune what we believe and know, but it's hard to answer that yet.
And so for Tennessee, as I mentioned earlier, the very next step is really district ownership of micro-credentials and rapid fire, but very specifically speaking, some of the things that they're going to focus on are the way that micro-credentials are introduced at the beginning of the year. We have learned that in-person trainings or an in-person kickoff is much more effective than a webinar, so that's one thing that they will do differently. Secondly, they will really, our district leaders hope to encourage principals to build time in to allow teachers to come together. We've learned that collaboration is one key, real key to success around the micro-credential. And thirdly, really allowing teachers to know who else is earning micro-credentials, again, in the spirit of network and collaboration. So they will do a better job of communicating who all's earning the micro-credential, what micro-credential are they earning. So those are the next, I think, 3 components to the next step with micro-credentials in Tennessee.
So I think our work is around two big buckets of work, and that's bringing teachers together for the development and the assessment of some micro-credential stacks that we've identified as needs. One of those are for special education students, really helping to develop the teaching capacity of our special education teachers to serve those students, and being able, since we are so blessed to have our special education cooperative with us, utilizing the expertise of those folks and the teachers that they work with in developing those stacks, and then also developing a stack that is in development but continue that work around teaching rural students from poverty. And that has really seemed to gain a lot of interest already, kind of nationally, folks calling, wanting to know where those are and how those are being developed, but really utilizing the expertise across our region to develop that stack about how do we really understand those students that we serve and those communities that we serve, and help to build the teaching capacity and the leadership capacity of our folks to serve those students. So I think that's around we have a lot of work to do, but around micro-credentials, those are probably our two next biggest steps.
So, and again, I apologize for running out of time, but you have so much to share that it's hard to pack it all into an hour. But talk a little bit about how it's come up several times in the last couple of days about the importance of locally generated micro-credentials for practitioners to be involved in their development, to pick them out, to have skin in the game and be vested in the process. So if you could talk a little bit from your perspective about the potential to do that from where you are. I'm not sure.
Absolutely. Teacher voice, again, is one of our one of the targets that Tennessee has been trying to reach. So the feedback that we've gotten from teachers after each year of the pilot, and again, we now have collected 3 years worth of data and feedback. Teachers want to be part of the development. They want to be part of the assessment of the micro-credential. They understand the expertise that they bring to the table, and they, as Barnett, again, back to Barnett, as he mentioned, they want ways to lead without having to leave the classroom. And the micro-credential offers many opportunities to do that because they can be part of developing local micro-credentials that they know are relevant to their state standards or even their district goals. And again, as I mentioned, they want to be part of the assessment program. For those of you who have been on scoring committees where teachers have either scored writing or scored any other teacher evidence, you know what a rich experience that is for teachers to look at the evidence and products of other teachers. They grow themselves there, and it's just a really valuable experience. So the micro-credential offers this opportunity as well. And so I think any way that we can get teachers involved in either the creation of or the assessment of micro-credentials, we are serving them and their growth just as much as they would by earning the micro-credential themselves.
The reason that we really wanted to do the pilot before we jumped 100% in was so that we could get the feedback from the teachers in our districts, and that could drive how we move forward. And we have gotten a lot of feedback from teachers in every step along the way. They've also had a collaborative space where they could share their thinking with each other, and with the understanding that everything that they tell us is going to help inform any revisions that happen to the ones that we created last year. But I also want to add, I think there's some real value, especially geographically where we are, to think about ways to partner with content experts and national organizations. And I go back to the globally competent teaching and learning, because that's not something that's readily available to teachers in our area. That isn't part of any university program. Oftentimes you're in a building doing that work as the only person who really has any passion or feels any desire to introduce their students to sort of students from all over the world. So I think that finding ways to partner with organizations that have content expertise and that may be able to fuel a deeper sense of the importance of that work can be really valuable too, and how we move forward with the micro-credentials we create. That isn't to say that we're not going to let Kentucky teachers help inform that work, because the two folks who earned all the micro-credentials in the globally competent teaching and learning have given us so much important feedback, and they want to be part of how we move forward with that work next year. But I do think that partnering with groups like ASCD and other national organizations is another way for us to grow the possibilities of things that micro-credentials can do for teachers in our districts.
I think some of the things that we do that kind of help give folks skin in the game is including them in those conversations as we or letting them really drive the conversation, not including them because that almost sounds perfunctory, but really letting them tell us what their needs are, but also helping them think through those designs of how they're going to embed things like micro-credentials or networks or mentoring within their schools and systems. We have so many different models across our region of folks using micro-credentials, from complete school buy-in to different teachers piloting, to principals working on micro-credentials that they want to take down to their teachers. They want to earn it first, and going in and working in classrooms to earn that micro-credential themselves. We have one of those principals in the room right now, Anna Prince, who she wanted to earn the micro-credential before she ever engaged her teachers in that work, because she wanted to know what it looked like and how that happened, how that rolled out into a classroom. And so for us to be able to support these folks in thinking through these different models and then being able to share those models with others who are thinking about that. So would this idea help, or would this idea help? I think that has been one way that we've really helped to help them get their skin in the game. But I also think that we are helping people think through structures that might be obstacles for them in dealing with this work. That whole thing about seat time being the currency for learning, how unfair is it for teachers who engage in these micro-credentials and are really, moving on a fast track to advancing their professional practice, and then have to turn around and say, where's your 4 days of professional learning? Where are your hours? Helping people think through that, helping people navigate around. I know this is probably not the case in your state, but in our state, our professional growth and evaluation system is suffering. I mean, we went whole hog into a model that didn't work, and now we've taken it back and said, districts, go do a model, and good luck with that, and hope it turns out okay. When really we could be thinking so much differently about growth and effectiveness and what that looks like. So I think helping folks work through some of those challenges and obstacles in ways that really meet their needs are ways that we're working with that as a co-op.
I could continue to ask questions, but that would be greedy of me, and there are probably folks in the audience who do have some questions for the panel in the last 6 or 8 minutes that we have left. So if you do have questions, you can holler, or I'll keep on going with mine and be greedy.
My name is, I'm Dee Jones, and you know that. I'm at Central Kentucky Educational Cooperative, and I have actually more than one question. I had to make notes. One thing, and Jennifer, you said this, and you talked, and also you did, Michelle. You talked about building capacity for teachers and leaders, and even though it sounds like I'm being sarcastic or something, I'm not. What do you want them to have capacity built in? Are you asking to build capacity in developing micro-credentials, or what?
Yes. We would really love to help build the capacity of teachers to have ownership in their own learning and to be able to identify those problems of practice and design a professional learning plan that is going to move them toward their desired outcomes, to really hit that sweet spot where professional learning improves professional practice and improves student outcomes.
So in that case, the micro-credentials very personalized, and it may or may not necessarily be for somebody else, is what you're saying. Okay. Then my second question, and I asked you this last year, and actually, Letitia, this also will go for you as well, and maybe Michelle. How many micro-credentials have you awarded now?
Oh, gosh. I would say at this point, Delia could probably give me an exact number, but I think we're looking at maybe around 123 or 124.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, and we have developed 7 and another one on the way. So it's like speaking of my baby.
I was just going to...
We'll have a gender reveal later.
Right.
But yeah, it's great.
Are those individuals, or you're not talking about stacks, are you?
No, those are individual micro-credentials. Yeah.
Okay.
Individual micro-credentials, yes.
And with the Bloom board, you've had how many?
I cannot answer that. I can send you an email that will tell you exactly, because we have people who are finishing up And we have looked at we're looking at individual earners, but our work was really around a program, which all of our programs were 5 to 6 micro-credentials. And I know we've talked a lot about grain size and what that really means, but each micro-credential had a very specific thing that was being measured. So for some of them, there was value in individually doing that, and that's some of the feedback we're getting from teachers from the pilot. I really learned a lot in this one micro-credential, but we really built our work around the idea that if you go through an entire program, it's comparable to the learning experience of a 3-hour semester course. And those aren't necessarily equal in the grand scheme, but people really needed to know that. And so that was sort of where we landed, that going through a 5 or 6 piece micro-credential program with 5 or 6 micro-credentials inside that program is equivalent to that. A lot of the people who participated, who earned, would tell you that it was more work than that. This isn't exactly your question, but I want to kind of expand on that a little bit. But some of them would say, yes, it was more work, but at the end, I really had an understanding that I didn't have before, or I was allowed to really show my growth and what my experience was.
Well, and the reason I asked this, Jennifer and Letitia specifically, is I'm thinking about scalability. You know, like, where do I start? You know, how many should I expect to kind of launch if I were to do something like this?
And I want to stress that we're not just about the development of the micro-credentials. We are in that area, we are doing that kind of work, but we encourage our teachers to look across all of the micro-credentials that are available and to earn the one that best meets their needs, because we don't pretend to be able to come up with micro-credentials that meets all of their needs. So they're looking across different issuers, all the way from Educators Rising to the Friday Institute to, they're looking across all of those to define the one that is best going to meet their needs, and we help them. It's no offense to us if they don't choose one of ours. Hey, it just didn't meet their need, and that's great. But we do that. And then as far as having those conversations about what's it worth, what's it value, we have to sit down and have those conversations with those principals and with those superintendents and those folks that are making those decisions. Because, if Letitia, she knows everything about assessment literacy and she works on that assessment literacy micro-credential and she's able to get it done very quickly because she understands that and she already does it, but I don't, and it takes me a long time, then it's still, is it fair to give me 12 hours of professional learning because it took me forever, but only give her 1 because we have the same competency now, but it's really hard to have those conversations about currency of learning when people are still so held hostage by those hours. It's infuriating.
I know your question was for Jennifer and Letitia, but I did just want to add an additional perspective, particularly around the first part of your question about capacity around what. It was important for us to start, actually, when we talk about building district capacity, to actually implement or to support schools and teachers in implementing the micro-credential, particularly in the beginning, and again, because this work is so new to so many people. I think seeing the model and experiencing the model several times is really important before you bring teachers on for us to start writing and developing and assessing. I think it's that they need to go through that experience several times, because while they may be strong and expert in the content, the process and the procedure of earning the micro-credential is new. And so in order to bring those together to effectively create or be a part of the micro-credential, it's something that they needed to go through for themselves in order that we felt to be most effective then in contributing to the micro-credential. And I'll add one more thing, sorry. To your other question about expectations, so yeah, I heard you ask about how many micro-credentials should we expect teachers to earn. I will say this, regardless of what number you land, I do have a recommendation from our teachers, but regardless of what number you land on, I think the key is to set the expectation, to have an expectation. So for example, on our teacher leader pathway, the expectation for that first year was that they earn 4 teacher leader micro-credentials. We had another pathway where the expectation was to earn 2, and that came from us gathering feedback from teachers to say, you know, we asked how many of these are feasible for you to earn without feeling stressed in a school year, and they landed on 2, so that was their feedback. But when they were asked to earn 4, they earned 4. When they were asked to earn 2, they earned 2. When they weren't asked, when they were just given the general, like, hey, here's some micro-credentials that you can earn, that's when we started to see a really spotty hit and miss. Maybe I'll earn some, maybe I won't. So we really found that without them feeling oppressed, that the suggestion or the expectation, they really rose to the expectation. So I think wherever you land, the clear communication about the expectation is what's most important.
Anyone else have any questions?
Related to what you just said, what has been the experience of typical implementation of a district for rolling out micro-credentials plan?
I'll jump in quickly. I'll try to be quick. So the typical experience is the first thing, as I mentioned earlier, is a kickoff. And so again, we recommend or have found more success with bringing teachers together, and specifically when they come together to get started on the micro-credential, at least work through a full cycle of the micro-credential so that they know what they're getting into. Additionally, that again allows them to create a network and to see the faces of other teachers in their district that they can turn to when they get stuck or need encouragement, et cetera. And then if there's a district coordinator, to schedule kind of regular check-ins or at least make themselves very accessible to the teachers, so that they know that there's someone that they can turn to in the district, et cetera, and then provide support throughout the year. And then really some sort of just a regular follow-up. And then lastly, not to just let it end and have everyone submit at different times and then it's over, but some type of conclusion, whether it be a certificate. Some districts are recognized teachers at a school board meeting, and that has been we found that to be a really meaningful way to end a school year around micro-credentials, in a nutshell.
We have not implemented with an entire district because this was our pilot year.
We have 23 districts in our service area, and we probably have 23 different models of what that looks like. But I think some of the successful models have been those districts who have chosen a particular area that they wanted to focus on. So whether it be with new teachers or whether it be with learning engagement, or they had a particular purpose in why they were going down that pathway. And then the same things with what Michelle was saying, really supporting teachers in that launch of that work and helping make sure that they understood, you know, what micro-credentials were, what they looked like, what, you know, digging deep in that and supporting them with that, and then having that end product. So we've had everything from dinners and t-shirts to recognitions at school board meetings to teacher award nights. We've had we've probably broken Twitter a few times with some of this, telling the stories of some of these folks, but really trying to lift those teachers up and highlight the work that they're doing, and adding another layer of recognition in addition to the badge.
Anyone else? Seeing no hands, I'll ask my final question. You don't have to give me the mic, I'll just yell real loud. So, what exists right now in this moment that makes you believe that micro-credentials can be an effective component of a solution toward competency-based professional learning. Why is now the right time? And then the second part, what are the obstacles that you need to work to overcome to make this available to help teachers become the best version of themselves they can be? There's a lot of questions.
I'm going to start because I think what I would say, what exists right now that makes me believe that micro-credentials can be part of a competency-based professional learning experience is the evidence that we got during our pilot. And I would imagine the same is true for you and you. Once you engage in the work with teachers, so I'll say our pilot was 100% educator classroom based. It wasn't that we didn't have any pilot pieces that were for administrators. And every one of our pilot micro-credentials, each micro-credential included a component where teachers videoed themselves implementing the lesson, because we felt like that was really important to get to evidence that showed competency. And I will just real quickly say, everybody knows what it's like to implement a lesson plan and your neighbor does the same lesson plan and your other neighbor does the same lesson plan, and you get pieces of student work that are completely different and all over the place. And so we wanted to not only have teachers analyzing their practice, creating a lesson learning experience for students, but we also wanted to be able to see what that implementation looked like and then teachers reflecting on that experience. So when I look at that compilation of evidence that teachers create and I read those reflections and I see that student work and I see that video of implementation, it is very apparent to me that that competency is completely there. I don't have to wonder if the teacher understood what he or she was doing. I don't have to question, did they really get to what it was we wanted them to be able to do or what they wanted to be able to do based on the task that was there. It's very evident to me. I think the biggest obstacle now is finding ways to communicate how valuable that is and how meaningful that is to everybody who hasn't participated in a micro-credential. So until you've done the work, until you've been in a micro-credential, until you have actually experienced it, it's hard to make people understand why it's so valuable, especially given the part that we're looking for teachers to actually demonstrate with that video component. And we hope that that's going to be one of the things that we can really communicate to our district leadership, is this can be a real game changer when you think about how you are creating growth avenues for the educators in your districts and buildings.
I think my answer for what exists right now is we look around the room. You know, the fact that you all took time out of your days to join us here for this work, to learn more about the work and to make connections, is one thing that's really going to propel the work forward. So the momentum that we have around knowing that we want to go deeper with professional growth for teachers, knowing that competency-based professional learning is really the key to sustained success, I think is what will help set this up for success. And as far as obstacles, I'm going to go with time. Teachers have so much on their plates consistently, and that's one thing that we continue to hear is, I would love to do this, but I would love to do this, but. And so we have to figure out a way to help school and district leaders understand the power of this type of work and how it should be prioritized above other things that are less impactful for students. And so I think that's going to be critical for us in order for not only micro-credentials, but competency-based professional learning in general to be successful, is we have to prioritize it. And by that I mean taking something off. My good friend Barnett over here talks about taking something off of teachers' plates. So what are we going to take off of teachers' plates so that they can have time to engage in this really rich type of professional growth?
This may not be the kind of evidence that you're looking for, but it's the evidence I want to talk about, and and I have the mic. So you all have been so nice to me, because every time someone has said recently received my doctorate, everybody claps like it's the first time you've heard it, and you've heard it 10 times since you've been here, I know. But I actually did my dissertation work around micro-credentialing, and I was really looking for quantitative data, because so many times data and evaluation around professional learning focuses on perception. And did you like it? And was it fun? And, it doesn't get down to the quantitative results. And so I really wanted to study in our region what is the impact that micro-credentialing is having on outcomes, and specifically on teacher professional practice and student outcomes, but then also how teachers feel that professional learning really mirrors what good professional learning is supposed to look like. So the study looked at 100 teachers in our region, 50 who've engaged in micro-credentialing and 50 who've engaged in traditional professional learning, and compared them in terms of their professional practice ratings in the on the Danielson framework, which is the Kentucky framework for teaching with just a new name put on it, the Danielson framework. Their scores, their spring scores on their interim assessment, which was the MAP test, because that's typically the test that's administered in our area. So looking at student outcomes on the MAP assessment, and then looking at teacher ratings on Learning Forward Standards Assessment Inventory. They gave me permission to use that inventory, which usually comes as a service from Learning Forward with a fee attached to it. But they were very interested in the research and said that I could use their framework for this study. And the result, I won't bore you with all of the T-scores and p-values and alpha levels and all that, but what we found in the research is that, of course, with the professional practice ratings, historically there's a problem with teachers being rated high on frameworks, whether it be Marzano or Danielson or whoever you use, and that held true in my study, because most of the teachers were rated in those highest levels of accomplished and exemplary, whether they engaged in micro-credentialing or whether they engaged in traditional professional learning. So there weren't any statistically significant results there. But for the MAP assessment, there were statistically significant results that showed that teachers who engaged in micro-credentialing had higher student achievement scores on the MAP assessment, statistically significant, with a effect size of moderate. So there really was a difference in student outcomes for those teachers who engaged in micro-credentialing. And as far as those ratings on the Learning Standards Inventory, which basically takes all of Learning Forward standards for professional learning, which are national standards for professional learning, those teachers who engaged in micro-credentialing rated their experiences higher at a statistically significant level. And then there were I ran independent t-tests on every one of those survey items, and was wondering about my sanity the whole time that I was doing it. But what we really found was that the teachers rated the standards highest in terms of learning design, which meant that they really enjoyed the format of that professional learning for a micro-credential, and then also as far as implementation. And we know that the beauty of a micro-credential is that it is applied in a classroom with the students we're serving right now in that context, and they really valued that component of that professional learning. So I think having some quantitative data that supports micro-credentialing as a viable format for professional learning, because that goes back to the obstacle. There's so much that fear of the unknown. I'm afraid people are going to choose an easy micro-credential, or is it really rigorous, or is it really valuable? And so to be able to say we have some quantitative data that says that it is, I think is evidence that they're timely, that we need to be thinking about this.
Really want to thank this fine panel of folks, but I'm going to pass on something that came from a dinner conversation last night with the commissioner and some other folks who were at the table about that very question: why micro-credentials and why now? It was an interesting conversation to have, because it was pointed out that this could not have occurred 10 years ago. The technology did not exist to be able to have folks earn them, let alone be able to develop them. The point came up that in Kentucky now there is no longer any professional development money, so we need to look to find alternate ways toward improvement for all of us. And a third point that came out of the conversation is our children in our schools that we serve, the most important thing that we do, are becoming more and more diverse. They have incredible needs that are different from school to school and classroom to classroom. And the flexibility and the nimbleness of micro-credentials makes it possible for the teachers in that place with those kids to acquire the skills that they need, not just for licensure or certification, but for ability to serve the needs of those children in the most effective way that they can. And I just wanted to share those 3 points from that conversation. If you will, join me in thanking these folks for taking time to be here. And thanks to you all for joining in this conversation. And if you would like to follow up with them, they will be here for at least 10 minutes because we won't let them out of the room for that long.